Fingers
Hello.
crossed.
Are we live?
Please let this work.
Good evening.
Well,
Good
we
evening.
are on YouTube.
Are you eating your dinner, Nick?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, like, I mean, who does this? You know, we've got one live show a week and Nick comes on eating his dinner. We have got a new blasé attitude to our show and people. Love it. What are you eating, Nick? What are you having for dinner? What sort of raw meat and some vegetable you dug up out of the garden?
Yeah, no, I hunted it. In fact, I've got a client. He just sent me a load of pictures of he's just hunted in some woods a wild boar, and there's a picture of him with this wild boar. It was all legal and everything good.
Wow. Yeah.
And he stripped it from nose to tail of everything. But apparently the shot went through the liver, and so just like evaporated the liver. And so apart from the liver, he got the lot. And he was showing me some of the cuts that he got. So very, very exciting. Nice. Well done, Ollie.
I see the US has a huge amount of wild wild boar, yeah. And apparently they turn into wild boar extremely quickly. Apparently a normal pig will turn he will turn into a wild pig, not like his kids and generations. He will grow hair and rougher skin and whatever way things happen. If he is allowed wild, like in a period of years, as opposed to, you would think, generations, they actually change to suit their habitat as well.
So that means incredible. That they revert to wild type. They shed domestication in one generation.
That's what hunters are saying. Yeah, that's
Explain
what
that, guys. How does that work? Because if you and I went out into the woods now, we'd be found dead in about 3 days.
Yeah, I've got a torn. Yeah.
I'm cold.
Yeah.
I can't light a fire.
Everyone always wants to know that about dogs. Is there examples of dogs rewilding? Did I tell you I was speaking to this wonderful Indian fella, Sangeep, and he works with free roaming Indian dogs, and he explains to me that there's a crucial difference with these dogs and village dogs, and he knows all the definitions. And he says these dogs have been separate from people for years and years. They'll tolerate them, they'll even feed off some of their scraps, but they won't come and live with them. And he says they're as wild as dogs can be. And I was asking him, is there I was kind of pushing for, like, is there a kind of a step back to wildness in these dogs? He goes, not really. They're very dog-like, and they've been generations and generations doing their thing, hunting wild by themselves, get a few scraps from humans, but they're not like, I stay in your doorstep. You wouldn't, they'll move in with your dog. So a lot of the dogs in India will hang around your house, so they're actually your dogs. And free roaming dogs will come and join the pack, and then they'll leave, but they're never your pets. And he said, no, there's no real step back to kind of wildness. And I was a little bit disappointed. I kind of thought that they would become a bit more wolf-like.
So why is there a speciation? Because I reckon the average cat would go back and become wild.
Yeah.
The average moggy, say. Yeah. I think Siamese might be. No, Siamese might do it, but maybe a ragdoll might find it difficult. Yeah. Possibly. But a dog doesn't go back to a wild, doesn't just go become a dingo.
Doesn't come
one generation dingo.
And even dingoes are very dog-like, and they've had 4,000 years to get wolfy, but they haven't. They've retained that. They're very dog-looking dingoes. You couldn't mistake them for any other animal. I mean, they interbreed with dogs still, but there was a story about the Moscow Underground dogs. Did you hear that? Where they are wild enough dogs. They live in and around Moscow Underground, and apparently the article in the Moscow Times says that they have taken steps backwards, for pointing ears, their tail carriage, more almond eyes, things that would be more expectation, like that you'd expect of. But it's just an article in the paper. It's not like a thing. Anyway, very interesting.
Okay, I would say my experience, because we were in Sri Lanka at Easter, and the average street dog there has got ears like this, has got a curly tail like this. They're generally pretty skinny.
Yeah.
And they just walk along or run. They trot along the side of the road incessantly.
Looking for bits.
Yeah, there are some traits. You know, if they came from Labradors and Collies and goodness knows who, the Brits and the Portuguese and goodness knows who brought over the last 400 years, if that was their original stock, they all look pretty similar.
Yeah.
They're all kind of a sandy, fawny sort of color as well.
Okay, yeah. Who knows? You know, like maybe the dingo is red because it perfectly suits the outback. You know, I mean, is that why they're that rusty red? I mean, you want to be that color. You don't want to be white. And I imagine if you left the dingo, if you left them up in the North Pole long enough, they would get far more white, husky type coats. I mean, that just seems logical, doesn't it?
Yeah, like an Arctic fox.
Like an Arctic fox, indeed. Yeah. Very interesting. Guys, we are Raw Pet Medics, and you will find us on patreon.com/RawPetMedics. And we always put in a little bit of extra content in there for anybody that can afford price of a cup of tea or coffee each month. It does wonders for us, and we deeply appreciate those that are doing that. And if you can't, it doesn't matter. We're going to be here anyway. You'll also catch us on podcast, where our diligent audio dude Pete is working away to get our shows up there, and we are climbing the rankings thanks to your efforts. You can just go to your Apple Podcast and you can just click that 5 stars, or 4, but 5 is probably more appropriate. I think we're all agreed. And that really helps us our side. So thanks for anybody that's listening there. Sorry about the Facebook. If there's a Facebook issue tonight, Bren is under.
No, we're live. We're live.
Oh, are we really? Good man, Bren.
Yeah.
Very good.
No, we're managing. Look, we've got people posting, but just the downside with how we're posting, we can't see them on our
We can't see it because it's normally Facebook comments. Yeah.
Well, if you open your Facebook app, lads, you will be able to see them and say hi.
Is that going to screw up our recordings, though?
Yeah, I don't want to touch anything. It's too.
All right. You guys don't touch anything.
Yeah. The internet will break.
No, don't break
the internet.
Don't break.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever watched the IT Crowd anyway. Did any of you guys watch? You guys don't watch TV, do you? You don't have time for TV. But there's a show called the IT Crowd. Brilliant. Written by the same guy that wrote Father Ted. And the IT Crowd is just so funny. And they had a little black box with a red light flashing on it. And they convinced the girls. She was like, "What's that?" And I said, "It's the internet." And she's like, "What? In that box?" He goes, "Yeah." And she was like, "That's the internet." Just a flashing red light. It was brilliant. But simple humor. Guys, can I start us off tonight with a little bit of drama that happened over the week? Not drama. I was doing a thing, Black Fur Day, and we were talking to a number of vendors and a lot of holistic vets and holistic type people, mainly US based, and they were all of a flurry about a new pandemic in dogs. And you can understand at this stage, you know us by now, that if I hear the word pandemic, I'll go, I'm going to check before I get too worried about this one. And so this was came out of California. Apparently UC Davis was leading the charge on this pandemic, and everybody
so-called pandemic.
Pandemic. Yeah, I think people use that word a bit loosely now, and there's times to use it. But look, anyway, who knows? So this was, everyone is all of a flurry, bar the natural vets that were on. And I was just thinking, that's instantly who I take my licks from now. I just think if a natural vet, like if Bren or Nick or 2 or 3 other people in my life tell me there's something to be worried about, I will worry instantly. And but generally, if I hear it from other kind of sources, I don't get alarmed straight away. I think I'm just going to take this in hand and have a look. So people give out their advice. I'm going to ask you for your advice, guys, how you might protect from a respiratory virus this is, because the dogs aren't responding to antibiotics, but they don't know what it is. Anyway, I just want to read this out. This was from this is a vet. CBS News was pushing the whole pandemic thing, of course, because they love it. And,
of course they were.
Yeah, of course they were. And then
tells newspapers.
Yeah, absolutely. If it bleeds, it leads. So like they got this from the same university. This is the article 10 hours ago on CBS News. A local veterinarian and UC Davis professor, this time, is telling pet owners not to panic after more cases of a mysterious respiratory illness impacting dogs was detected across the United States. They're monitoring it closely. I think the point is, from this article, this paragraph down here, it's only a small handful of animals. It's not like an entire community of animals got sick, Jandry said. It's 10 animals here, 40 animals over the course of 6 months.
Out of how many? Out of how many animals in California?
Oh, forget about it. I mean, who knows? Second, third most populated state. Enormous.
40 million. Billion. Yeah. Millions. Yeah. So, how did they count? How did they find them? Tell me. How did you find 10 sick dogs in a population of 40 million?
They turn up at a vet's and they don't know what it is, and the dogs have a cough. And he said the symptoms aren't severe. It's not. These dogs aren't dropping down dead. So on the back of that, not to say this isn't nothing, by the way, you know, there's going to be weird stuff that's going to spread through people all the time, spread through dogs, God knows. But I think we have a big need to name it now. And if we don't have a name, it must be a new thing. If we have a new thing, well, we couldn't possibly understand how to treat a respiratory disease. So how would you guys treat a respiratory disease? How would you protect a dog? There's two different questions. How do you protect yourself from picking up coughs, and dogs particularly? Actually, are coughs seasonal in dogs like they are in us, which we suspect to come in winter for a particular reason because, you know, let's face it, vitamin D deficiency and a few other bits and pieces. But are they, why do dogs get coughs? How do you protect against them? What do you do if he gets a cough? Let's start with that.
Okay, let's back up the truck a tiny bit. I think first of all, we need to name it, and I'm going to name it not very severe and not very infectious. Not very exciting.
Catchy name, Nick.
Canine respiratory syndrome. Okay, number one, I'm going to do that. Okay, because when you name it, you game it. You
shame it.
You can shame it. You lame it. When you name it, you lame it. Yeah, there you go. So the first thing is, I mean, you've got to get it in context. How many dogs die or because they're being hit by cars every day in California? How many dogs are dying of pneumonia? How many dogs are dying of, you know, preventable diseases in California? How many dogs are dying of poor nutrition, more to the point, in California? Okay, so I think we need to get all these things in context. You know, when you live, you die. There is always a risk. Life is a fatal condition after all. But so that would really be the first thing. So for me, it would just be the basics. That's a really fantastic raw food diet, lots of vitamin D, lots of zinc, lots of minerals, getting everything right. And, you know, the chances are you're going to be in good shape. I mean, that's horribly simplistic. But what's interesting about the COVID thing is that the authorities did not say, eat right, get some exercise, get the vitamin D, get your zinc. These are things that you can do at home. If you're worried, don't just sit there. You can actually do this. You go to Boots, get some vitamin D, or order it in from wherever it might be. And so I think that just optimizing health generally for every dog in every situation, whatever their age, their breed, their otherwise health status, just try, you know, to optimize things. And for me, nutrition would be that.
Can you boost immunity? Like this is not seasonal in dogs, so it's not like for us. We should probably focus on a bit of echinacea, certainly vitamin D, bit of K, and a few other things. But what with dogs? Can you boost immunity in dogs? And is there a certain time to do it, or do you just do it via good diet, a few nice natural additions, power additions? What way do you do it?
There are some nice additions. Bren, you've got a little nice line on this.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely use either dimethyl or trimethylglycine. I think, you know, using some of the colostrums can be useful.
Yeah.
Why
colostrum? Why colostrum?
Because you're pumping in antibodies basically to the system. It stimulates the mucoid layers and the immunity there. It doesn't just attach to the antibodies in that milk that are particularly, so they're cow viruses generally. Okay, they're not going to be specific dog viruses. So unless you've got colostrum from a dog that's been exposed, you're not looking at a specific antibody response. But there are some great mushrooms to add as immune stimulation. You know, those can be great. So there's 7 shrooms from 4-leaf rover. There's just so many options out there that I would always say are worth doing. I love, so you're not seeing, I'm so glad you're not seeing what Facebook's saying, you know, and some of your greatest supporters saying, but of course there's a vaccine. So I'm not even going to go there. So
there will be recompense on Saturday.
I've got your names.
There will be recompense.
They do. There is a company there, Everest, and Everest have just built 160 million building in China to produce mRNA rabies vaccines for pets. So they have rabies vaccines for pets. I spent more time than I should have, wondering is there people have they started using them in California recently, and so but they've only got they got the green light there in March this year, and shares have exploded, and it's like, wow, okay, so now we're getting mRNA vaccines for pets.
Of course, I've not even mentioned things like echinacea.
Yeah,
can be really useful to give. Good old honey. I think a good honey, because that you've got some crossovers with some of those where they will stimulate not just the viruses, but also bacteria. Something that we've got to be aware of. I saw somebody's commented on here. One person has contracted swine flu in North Yorkshire, and they're already talking about it on the BBC because swine flu's back. So that'll be the next vaccine that everybody's going to take, because one person in the UK has managed to contract it.
Yeah. The other alternative, we just wall off North Yorkshire for a year or two.
I think that's not a bad idea.
That's fine. That's north of me. I'll still be free.
We'll come down to Leeds as well, just to make sure. And we'll cut off radio communications and all telephone, and you'll be fine. You'll be fine. We'll annex you to North Korea, and you'll be right. Yeah.
These are good ideas, Nick. Maybe we should take this off air, though. I'm thinking this. 4 p.m. took a strange political swing there last night.
I'm only joking. I used to work in Yorkshire. I know a lot of Yorkshire people.
Used to. Yes. That's the point.
Yes,
got thrown out for not being able to do the accent. I think.
Well, you've given 4 tips there. That was brutal.
That was brutal.
Yeah. Good. Ben, you've given 3 or 4 tips there: dimethyl or trimethylglycine, colostrum, echinacea, honey. Would you do us a favor? Would you post that on Facebook after and give people an idea of doses for how they would do that and give that to their dogs? Because those ideas are great, but I wouldn't know how much glycine to give to a pet. Where do you normally get glycine from, if not from a supplement?
You need the methylated forms. Okay,
dimethyl or trimethyl.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a nutrient glycine? It sounds like something I should know.
Nutrient is an amino acid.
Yeah, it's an amino acid.
So that's glycine, and then it's just whether it's methylated and how methylated it is, and that's helping with some of the ATP production in certain cells and switching on some of the immune system cells genes to be activated.
Why
so
wouldn't that happen?
It's really useful.
Why wouldn't it happen from eating food?
Because you know that some of your genes are poorly methylated if you're, especially on high processed diets, if you're on the wrong sort of diets, your hormones are up the swanny for various reasons. All of those things that can cause your genes to be inappropriately activated or deactivated.
Okay, cool.
Or I'm just going to point you may have seen it, Gary Brecker. Yes, Conor, you saw it.
Yeah.
Bren, did you see it? Okay, so I'm just going to signpost to Joe Rogan about 4 weeks ago. It's 28th of November now. About 4 weeks ago, he had an amazing guy called Gary Brecker who offers from his company's called 10X, and he seems a very genuine guy, and he certainly seems to know his nutrients. And he offers a 5-part gene test. You do a swab on the inside of your cheek, you send it off, and they will say, you're good for this gene, you're good for this gene, you're deficient in this gene, and therefore you need this specific supplement because your genes are not producing the enzymes that allow you to follow through on the pathway. So you give the end product of that pathway and you kind of bypass it. And he was describing it as being an absolute game changer.
Yeah.
There's one called MTHFR,
which sounds rude.
But in fact, something like 43% of humans are deficient in this gene.
That was 43% of women couldn't digest folic acid. Folate's the good stuff. Folic acid is the stuff that's produced in factories.
And in fact, you want the methylated folate.
And
you want the methylated folate.
Methylated folate, which is ready to go, but 43% of women can't digest folic acid. And that's the one that they lace your cereals with, and also in the cheap supplements. So when the doctor says take folic acid, that's the wrong thing to be taking. They say it perturbs the gut flora. And now they're wondering, is there a link between that and depression? So you know,
and same with some of those minerals. You know, they're giving you,
which is we got to look into that more. I mean, where does all the minerals that like this crappy zinc oxide, magnesium oxide, copper sulfate, iron oxide? You can't digest that.
Iron sulfate,
And so where does it go? Well, something's going to eat it, you know. So that's, you know, we've got to look into that. That's a hot topic.
That is a hot topic.
We're going to be first to the
Sorry,
table.
guys. So there's some great stuff coming up on Facebook. I am.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I love MTHFR. So the
yes,
you know what that stands for. That's the mother of all reproduction genes.
Reproduction.
And then there's a few bits about people squirting lucillin up their grandkids' nose is just to keep them clear of bringing stuff in. I love it. Yeah. So there's all sorts of stuff going on. I'm going to add some comments afterwards. I love it when you guys are getting super excited. Without us being able to see what you're saying.
They think that we're not watching, but then we'll have a glass of wine there, and it's like, let's talk. Here, let's give me your answer in 20 words here, just to, because this is a very common question. Let's just deal with it as a pops.
Bren, you can go first on this one.
Josie's online. Okay. What type of recreational bone for a 20 kg dog?
Oh, I would definitely go for something like a lamb neck, venison neck, something like that. I would even go for lamb ribs, spine, something along those lines. Pelvis often is something that you can do once somebody's taken, you know, some of the meat off. If they're just cubing that for a stew, then stuff at the back. Cool. So it's a nice softer bone that can get through. It's not going to cause any slab fracture risks, anything like that. Tail obviously can be really good, sometimes with skin on.
Oxtail's pricey. That's a pricey cut for people. What about you, Nick? What bones? 20 kg dog.
I'm going to come into that from a slightly different tack. Completely agree with everything that Bren has said, but I'm saying, has that dog ever had bones before? If it hasn't, I think you need to go back to kindergarten and you need to start with very soft chicken carcasses and give them a month or two there, and then move on to chicken wings, duck necks, turkey necks, give them a month or two there, and then and I'd call that primary school. So we go from kindergarten to primary school, and then secondary school would be the ribs, the necks, the briskets
of
this world, and that would be secondary school. And then if you really want to go to college, when you're a veteran bone eater, you can consider possibly using leg bones. So that would be the same answer as Bren, but just given a kind of a time
build up.
And remember, guys that are posting, you know, sure, chicken feet, but that's really for a smaller dog. You know, a 20 kg dog would demolish that in seconds. It's almost inhaled. So I would definitely.
That's all right, though. You can give
something for recreational bone. That's the point.
It depends what you're feeding it for. Listen, if you want to give a pack of chicken feet, go for it. Have at it. You know, and just full of tough to digest collagen, which is your prebiotics for your carnivore. So a chicken foot, wonderful treat. I always wonder about that little hooky nail. I always go, "Ooh, I wouldn't fancy that." Dogs.
He says, biting his nails. For his lecture on Saturday.
My nails don't look like that. Thankfully, maybe my toenails do, but not. Good for gripping. Okay.
Really interesting, guys. I'm going to name drop here. I was speaking to Ian Billinghurst last night, and he was talking about. As you do. And he was saying, no, bear with me. He was saying that he thinks that cartilage on bone, recreational bones or otherwise, and chicken's feet and what have you, he says that the key factor there is, I think he was saying tumor necrosis factor, and he believes that to be anti-cancer, and that's why we're seeing less cancer in our raw-fed dogs than in the kibble brigade. Which I think is fascinating.
Is that not down to, so we know that some of these promote fiber. So it's like the MCT-C8 oil. So I always thought, ketogenesis, it's driving the body's metabolism. But actually, it's changing the microbiome. And it's the microbiome's influence on the metabolism that actually creates ketogenesis.
I've heard that.
And so it's then back to, is it actually that increased fiber in the cartilage, that increase what it's feeding in our microbiome, or our dog's microbiome, is actually the anti-cancer bit?
But he was saying it's actually this factor. I think he said tumor necrosis factor, that in addition to chondrocytes feeding microbiome, and
we all have our theories.
I don't get the gut flora role in ketosis. What's that bit there?
It's about, so that's all about activation of your genes. So it's the epigenetics influence, and it's about the metabolites that those bacteria produce as their postbiotics, and the influence they have upon your hormonal system and your genetics to then change how your cancer works. So that's
nice.
Interesting. Wow.
Really
different stuff. You've got to realize the integration of your microbiome in your whole system. Everything.
Totally. It is everything. It's the mother of everything. How about we get Ian Billinghurst on as soon as we can to talk about cancer? How about that?
That's a good one.
Shall we do that?
That's a great idea. Let's mark it in. Let's jump to Patreon here and get some questions done for the guys who have been sponsoring. I have it's up here first. Just give me 2 minutes. Okay,
Brady, you jump into one, because otherwise you're going to be the question master.
I don't. Doesn't matter. That's my views. Are killing it. I would like to know how to deal with delayed gastric emptying naturally. Because I don't know the answer to this, so I'm happy to read it out. Not just a delay in the emptying of contents from the stomach, but also low digestive juices in the stomach and difficulty as a result digesting bone that isn't minced. Presenting as vomiting food that looks the same as when it went in many hours after a meal, with no smell, no sick smell, no acidic smell, just a faint smell at dinner. 6-month-old pup, 6-month-old lab.
Okay, go on then, Brent. I know what you're going to say.
That definitely needs checking for, is it even reaching the stomach? Okay.
Megaesophagus.
If there is no, you use litmus paper. If it does not go to acid, okay, then you've got a real suspicion that actually it's sitting in the esophagus. The esophagus isn't working properly, okay? Could be post-vaccine that it's not working properly. It could be post-inflammatory disease. It could be that there's an issue with nerves. So you might need a chiropractor to check that puppy, that it might have had an issue in birthing. That it's actually cricked something out of place, and get that checked, especially at such a young age. Okay, it's worth getting it checked really early on, and then you need to make sure that that's all going. So people will assume that it's reaching the stomach, okay, because it's sitting there and it's staying down for so long. But actually, if it ever comes back and it doesn't smell acidic, and it doesn't look like it's been digested, and it doesn't, have, it still looks like food. You've got to absolutely question, has it ever got through the cardiac sphincter of the stomach?
Wow.
Sarah Plum, is that who asked the question in the first place? Okay, it is reaching the stomach. So Sarah, how do you know it is reaching the stomach? I'm sure if you say it is, but how do you know that? Is that a gut feel, as it were? Or have you done the pH analysis? Or is it just, it's been down there 6 hours, so it must have been in the stomach? Because I've seen megaesophagus where food appears the next morning after an evening meal. It just sits there, comes back up, is this beautiful little kind of salami sausage. So, Sarah, if you can come back to us on that.
It needs to, really like, everybody knows the smell of vomit. And when there's food involved, everyone knows the smell of that acidic, half digested meal. So that, but okay, fair enough. It could be when you're
no. So the comeback is load retching. So there's loads of retching before vomiting. So that's not always an indicator. It's often if they abdominally thrust, we would consider, but only if it comes back with bile, with acid, with other factors that show it's been in the stomach. I would still suggest that there is the changing of purple to red and things like that. That's leaching out. That's in a fluid zone. Totally. Sitting in there. So Sarah, I would please say it's worth doing a food test with your dog. they can do a conscious, just using sandbags to take an X-ray following the food at the vets. Yeah. Okay. And then they can double check, is that actually hitting the stomach? Okay. Because I'd seriously question. The next thing that you get projectile vomiting of is usually with pyloric stenosis. So you've got a narrowing of the outflow of the stomach, okay, which means it'll sit there and you'll usually get a type of thing. It'll look like The Exorcist gone nuts. But I really think that all of your descriptions, I would still say I'd be suspicious of.
That's worrying.
Megaesophagus.
Oh, that turned quite serious.
Sorry.
But listen, this is great, guys. I mean, how lucky are people to be able to talk to two vets like this and get top feedback? It's fantastic. It's so
Sarah, I think just very simply speaking, get to your vets, just describe it to them, and they can do a fairly simple test, and they can either feed food and then see where it lands, or they can put some radiopaque dye in that and just see whether it does actually get through, or whether the main bolus stays in the esophagus, which is the tube that links your throat, your mouth to your stomach. If that sphincter is just narrow and it's just not, which we see in pups sometimes, it just sits on top of the stomach, kind of queuing to get into the stomach, and can't actually get into the stomach. So eventually the esophagus goes, right, sod that, and just brings it all up. And that can have quite a lot of expulsive effort. So that's where you could get your abdominal thrusting. If, however, the stomach is not working properly and it's not moving through, then, as Bren says, then the pyloric sphincter might be blocked, and thus it's the same problem but a bit further down the system. So lots of interesting things there. There are some fairly simple tests that you can do to elucidate what's happening there. Please come back and tell us what you've got.
Good luck, Sarah. Good luck, Sarah.
Let us know how you get on.
I've got a really great test, guys. How do you test the gut transit time? That is to say, the time it takes food to go from the mouth to the anus and out onto the ground. How do you test that in a dog? Because some dogs it's going to be probably ridiculously 2 to 4 hours, and some dogs it's going to be a day or two. Okay, depending on the disease process and how good their digestion is and what have you.
Fiber levels.
All sorts. Also, hypothyroidism. Here's another mega for you, Sarah. You can get a mega colon. Yeah, so all the food goes all the way through and then stops, because the megacolon is just, there's no propulsive effort whatsoever at the end, which is what allows you to evacuate stool. So how do you measure that? That's a very long question.
Put in a darkly coloured chunks of darkly coloured vegetable like beetroot, little squares.
Somebody's put sweet corn.
Yes,
sweet corn.
Yes,
tomato seeds.
That's exact. Jolly green giant sweet corn. You just put it in the food.
Or tomato seeds.
It isn't digested.
When we were doing
like kids.
When we were doing the environmental stuff in college, there was divers, and the way they track the sewage outlet into bays where they're worried about it, the way they track it is from the sewage outlet, divers walk along the seabed or float above it, and they track the corn and tomato seeds. They go, all that stuff sinks to the bottom. So in Dublin Bay, they were able to see that stuff. That's how much undigested matter was, because when it overflows, when they can't process it, they just pump it out, because there's only so much, either that or just flows out to the nearby housing estate. So it's interesting that they follow it by undigested matter. Imagine that for a job in the morning, putting on your mask. Big. Okay, guys, here's
you get a full breathing tube thing with no way that you're gonna.
Yeah, definitely.
I'd want one of those diving bell helmets. I don't even touch the water.
Here's one from
no seepage around here.
Anna Marie Brock. How much fat is too much? My entire male Malamute preferentially picks the fat off of most raw that he gets, and he can't get enough bone into him. If I could, lads. So look, I think there's a bit in dogs that they absolutely love fat. Okay, so there's a feast or famine feeding routine that all carnivores are going to have, but dogs are shown to have it. Many different trials ad lib where they put down different foods and they let the dogs have at it, lads, eat what you want, and they let them do it daily, keep eating it. And initially the dogs always go for fat. It's the highest pound for pound way of getting in energy, and energy is the number one thing in the world. Nutrients are second, energy is one. So you pack in the fat, and it's a commodity. You know, there isn't big fatty animals walking around in the wild. Only in springtime, little fatty lambs, little fatty rabbits. But for the large part, they're not too fatty, really, not compared to our chicken, ultra processed, our chicken coming out of barns and whatnot. So anyway, the point is, dogs will pig out on fat for the first few days, but when they start to realize that, okay, hang on here, I'm going to have a heart attack, or actually I shouldn't have said that, but they start to realize, I know I shouldn't have.
Where's your evidence?
I shouldn't say that. But after 2 or 3 days,
I should get my cholesterol tested.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Don't mind Nick up.
No.
But after about 2 or 3 days, the dogs then move on to protein. They increase more and more protein, and the fat contents. By the way, carbs are never included. Even in a study by Mars Pet Food, the max that these dry-fed dogs included was 7% carbs. So dry food studies tell you that dogs don't want carbs in their diet. They pig out on fat, and then the protein starts to come up, and then they eat a higher protein diet. So your Malamute, you might argue, is quite a fat-eating machine, because that would be where they came from, and that might be an argument. But if he's picking off the fat, I wouldn't be worried in the slightest, because as we learned in Helsinki, the meat that we're feeding to our dogs is very fatty. Dogs are, we have to assume, are used to eating very lean animals, lots of protein and a little bit of fat. Okay, that's usually the diet. And chicken that's coming out of these barns that have been corn fed for 12 weeks, they're very fatty. There's a fatty meat, fatty cartilage. You got the fat on the outside of it. So much fattier meat, and fatty beef mince, cheap fatty beef mince. Let's face it, we don't feed the 5% beef mince as much as we should, and so that's quite fatty. And the problem is, as the fat content goes up, the nutrient content of your meal goes down. So while fat contains omega-3 and A, D, E, K, and a few bits and pieces, while it has that stuff, most of your mineral sink is in your meat, cartilage, and bone, and that's in the red part. So as you're eating a high-fat diet to gorge on calories, you are not hitting your nutrients, and you will suffer a nutrient deficiency over time. So what happens is dogs start to taper off the fat because they just don't need it anymore, and they increase the protein. Your Malamute is being smart. He's practicing zoo pharmacology probably. He's saying, I don't need any fat. There's plenty of fat in the red meat that I'm eating here. And so I would trust the dog. I would say maybe the meat that you're feeding is quite fatty. I mean, I would question some of the complete raws that are out there. They can be quite fatty. You can look at them and you'll see the pinkness of the meat. And when you're used to handling meat, you know straight away, that's a fatty bit of meat there. So your dog maybe says he has enough, you know. And regarding the bone, we don't know how much bone dogs need. So if he doesn't need the bone, he's not going to take it. If he needs it, he'll bloody take it, you know. So
I'm going to just challenge you there for a second. With some of these photos. You know, I said about this client of mine, lovely fella, used to be a lawyer, and now he just kind of lives off the land. Very interesting guy. Okay, so I'm just going to take you through some of the slides that he sent. I hope this doesn't upset anybody. In fact, no, I'm going to get rid of that because it might upset everybody.
No pants on.
Okay. While he's finding his photos, my challenge.
There we go.
Go on.
All right, here we go. So this is from Wild Boar. Can you see that?
Yeah.
I think there's quite a lot of fat there. I need to work out which way to go. Look at that.
Yeah, but that's just one. But he's just cut the side off the pig. I mean, all in all, if a bit of fat is on the outside of the butt, that does look quite fatty on the right hand side there, actually. Yeah, but that doesn't contain.
Depends on the time of year, Connor.
No, there's no fatty animals walking around there. When do you think that's going to be? September time, because they're eating a few.
I don't know. I think this is something we need to look into, because a lot of people say they'll always go for the younger ones, or maybe they'll choose their animal, because if you're going to chase after something, you might as well chase after something that's got a bit of body on it.
Okay.
Because A, they're going to be a bit slower, and B, you're going to get much more return.
My male goats basically bulk up through the spring and summer, ready for rutting. Okay?
You're feeding them McDonald's and stuff, though, Ben.
I don't. So. Oh, he's so good at this. So I would like to challenge you, though, because
I have a defense.
I got what he said in Helsinki, okay, about, of course, if you're feeding day in, day out a higher, fattier diet, then mineral content may come down.
Yeah,
but of course, you've got to remember there's lots of other nutrients and bioregulators in fat.
There's bits
and actually, and there are going to be fat-soluble vitamins in some of that fat. Okay, so you know you are going to get some nutrient, and of course, if you've got a Malamute or another sled dog, you know the amount of blubber that they sometimes would feed to those because they need their energy.
Racing season,
you know, it's not. I would not be averse to dogs having a fatty meal in a high energy requirement situation, intermittently or on certain days. I think the issue that he was trying to get across is that actually when you're looking at nutrient factors per 1,000 calories, if the meat is fattier, then obviously the nutrient value would go down. If that's a day in, day out. I sort of agree with you there, but I wouldn't say that it's impossible for a dog to have
the chances
high
of this,
fatty meals.
The chances of this Malamute being a working Malamute is very tiny. I mean, who works Malamutes? Nobody does. So like they're not sleds anymore.
The best in people.
I mean, I mean, nobody even uses them sledding anyway. Not anymore. They barely even use Siberian Huskies. They just use mutts now. But look,
there's more things to working than sledding.
Here's my what else can Malamutes do?
Well, they might be doing canicross. They might be doing.
They're too beautiful for canicross. Here, look, I would say, here's my defense: Deinfeld. I'll share the study afterwards, and then everybody can have a look. But look, the Deinfeld study was interesting. What she did was she sampled prey animals all through the year. Okay, so that's a nice balance of it. So it gets rid of the seasonality discussion for the moment, unfortunately. But what she found was the protein to fat ratio, parts now, not in metabolizable energy. So begins at 4 parts protein to 1 part fat. Okay, so that is very lean compared to, let's say, your 5% beef mince, which is 15% protein, 5% fat. So you're not even at the leanest. With your leanest beef mince, you're not at the leanest prey animals that this girl found. And from there, it descends down. So rabbits, rats, mice, going down to reptiles and birds, 7-8 parts protein to 1 part fat. Very lean. And so there isn't actually animals above 4.4 parts protein to 1 part fat, which is why
20%. Yeah,
and from a metabolizable energy, it's 2 to 1. But like, just it's easier for people to understand that when they buy 5% beef fat mince, they think it's 95% protein, but that's including water. So it's 5% fat, it's 80% water, 75% water. So you're talking 15-20% protein. So it changes things when you realize you're only talking about 30% of the meat there. So when you buy 15% beef fat, 18% is the maximum fattiness you're allowed to sell. That's actually more fat than it is protein, if significantly so. So I think they are lean animals, and I get periodically there will be some fat little cheeseburgers walking around, but prey animals are not going to eat to the point that they're fat and susceptible to predation. There's no way they'll be that thick.
So there's loads of people looking at various animals. Whilst we're talking, I want somebody to just look up the proportion of fats in seals.
Oh, God. Can we start somewhere else? Yeah, you know, a guy had a great point. Okay, this guy he was talking about the obesity crisis, and he was saying it's all to do with filthy oils. It's nothing to do with insulin and carbs. Okay, his defense for this was he took 3 different populations of rural types, what you call them, and nomadic people. Nomadic folk, and he looked at, first of all, northern tribes, northern Inuits, and that kind of stuff. And he was looking at this really high fat diet that they're eating that we all studied back in the 70s, and was like, okay, it wasn't, but you guys probably did. And I was like, these guys aren't dropping their heart attacks. If anything, most of them had quite an enviable BMI. It's only really when Western diets started coming in that they've started to kind of increase in size. So they were eating extremely high fat diets, and it wasn't making them fat. So that should have told us straight away, fat doesn't make you fat, but we ignore those outliers, and we don't want to talk about that. We've got sugar to sell. But then he said, so is high protein diet the way to go? So he looked at the Masai Mara, and he said these guys, of all free roaming people, for nomadic people, eat a very high protein diet: blood, milk, and meat, and then this dominates their diet. And so he said really high protein, a little bit of fat, very little carbs, and they look very lean too and healthy, and their blood glucose was fine. And then he goes, I need to find some kind of nomadic people that eat high carb diets. And he went out to Papua New Guinea, where there's 2 or 3 big tribes of people, and they live largely on sweet potatoes. Hate that. But so this tribe was 80-90% of their diet was sweet potatoes in various different forms. And he said, so they should be obese, shouldn't they? And he says, but they're not. They eat ad lib as much carbohydrates as you want, but these guys don't get fat either. And so he was kind of leading on to the point that it is the role of filthy refined oils in the process. And he blames that entirely, and not actually the whole foods that you're eating. Whole foods aren't really the problem. And he defends you can eat as many potatoes as you want. It's only when it starts coupling up with other stuff. How does that sound?
Wasn't there a tribe in Papua New Guinea that was all about the amount of fruit and other foods that they could eat because their microbiome and their epigenetics were different? To that, and it actually switched how their metabolism worked. Because it was switching genes. But anyway, that's an aside. And I agree. You know, so much of the processing and whether it's the level of, is it high GI, low GI types of fiber that they're taking through, the amount of fiber that they're taking through, as well as then, absolutely right, processed oils, you know, that level of oxidation that's going in and how the damage is going on.
Totally right. This is the guy, he's called Chris Kenobi, and his name is spelled Knobbe. So it looks kind of difficult to read on YouTube. But if you think of ObiWan Kenobi, then you've got it. He's called Kenobi, Chris Kenobi, right? ObiWan Kenobi, Chris Kenobi on YouTube. He will take you there. And his conclusion was that the similarity between the Inuit and the Maasai and the Papua New Guineans is that they didn't eat refined carbohydrate, refined grains, they didn't eat refined sugar, and they didn't eat refined seed oils, which is what we absolutely stuff ourselves on, the Europeans and the Americans, and I'm afraid the Americans especially. And you know, who has the health problems and the weight problems and what have you, they are proportionate to how much of these refined. It's the refined food is essentially often very good for you. It's when you start refining it, that's when you get problems.
I love that. First of all, I'm disappointed that you sent it to me because I thought it was an original point I'm making, and I just you've ruined that. Now I've made you look like the smart one. I love when you find something cool and you go, "Ooh, that's great! I can't wait to tell that to the lads." And that was one of them, sadly. No, what was me? Oh, what I was going to say? Oh, I can't remember. Oh, I had something very smart. Now it's gone. Can't remember.
That makes you look really smart. Anyway,
let's go to Patreon, boys, and it gives you 2 minutes to think of it, Brady.
Yes, and I would say we are so looking forward to all of you guys who've got tickets for the live. Please be aware there is a bit of a scam. I feel quite flattered, but there is a bit of a scam going on for people touting tickets for our event. Please ignore them. We've double checked the names. They are not on the list. They don't have tickets to sell, so please don't get caught out buying tickets, because we have obviously now closed Eventbrite so that we know everybody's meal choices, etc. So we are so looking forward to seeing you all. Got some really exciting stuff to share, all three of us, and also we're doing a bit of the feline guys too. There's so many stores to do stuff. We're going to have so much fun in the afternoon. And hopefully be conscious the next day. So that's going to be...
Just get me back on the plane. That's
And guys, what time's your plane?
I don't want to look. No, I booked my flights. So I only book good times. So
I book like 6 o'clock in the evening.
No, I'll go like I like lunchtime, because then you get to the airport and you can chill out and you can do an hour. I don't like early morning. I don't like the end of the day in case I'm really blue and depressed and I don't want to sit there stressing.
Cheryl Tomlin will teach you a few things about how to get onto a plane.
My God, you can get
with 20 minutes. With 20 minutes.
Oh my God, that's amazing,
guys. I'm just going to say to everybody watching, Fiona Murray is running the show, and she runs nuclear power plants. Okay, she is precise to the picosecond, and it's going to start at 10 o'clock on the dot. Not 1 minute past, not 1 minute to. It's going to start at 10 o'clock on the dot. So please, please, please be in your seats. You can grab a coffee beforehand. It's going to start at 10 o'clock. You will miss stuff from the second of 10 o'clock. So please be with us. It's going to be a fun-packed day. There's going to be lots there. I've got I'm excited about my talk. I'm talking about a whole new nutrient that I've just discovered. Conor,
yeah,
what do you? Gives us a little bit of a snooze, doesn't it, Conor?
I was Nick's going to go for a snooze during mine. I was just going to say, if anybody's actually planning any events, Fiona Murray is doing an excellent job, and we'll pass you around her mobile number. Loves planning events, so you just let us know, and we'll hand around her number for the next few months. She'll love that. What am I talking about? I don't know. I'm not going to tell anybody what I'm talking about, so I'm going to save that.
Mystery. And man of mystery.
Yeah, but I am going to show you this one thing, just one little teaser. Actually, no.
Go on. No. It doesn't come in a bottle, does it?
No, does not really know what that is. But no.
Brent, what are you going to be talking about, mate?
He hasn't even thought about it yet.
I have so many exciting things to go through.
You've only got 30 minutes. Exactly.
I know. No. Well, no, I'm not going to give it away. I think everybody knows what I've talked about. I love about microbiome. I've got to be careful I don't take all of your thunder, because you guys are after me. So it's,
always.
It's going to be hold on to your seat. So I said, strap yourself in. Somebody said, strap yourself on. And I was like,
different party.
Different party. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go. I think that's an Irish saying. They always seem to have it inside out.
Strap on. Yeah, no.
Strap on, strap
you say
in.
that, I know what you
anyway. So anyway,
okay.
That's an aside. So
guys, let's jump onto Patreon and do a few quick fire questions, shall we? Yeah.
All right. Toodaloo, everyone.
Absolutely great.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.